Folks, it's time for public comment. We welcome your comment at this time. Please rise and state your name. Go to our microphone to our left. We are continuing to tweak the system, so we hope it meets everyone's satisfaction this morning. If you need the microphone brought to you, we'll be happy to do that.
Morning. Excuse me. Is the microphone working?
It is. Mm-hmm. Yes, it
It
is.
is working?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're coming through loud and clear.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. I see that you have no objection to me using this because I talked about it before and it does make things much more comfortable.
Mr. Piper?
Yes.
As far as running the meeting room, if someone comes in to sign in, we will move it back.
That's fine.
So if someone comes in, because it is to take attendance, it's not to be used as a microphone.
Mr. Hart,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. And I have no problem with that. In the meantime, I hope I can use it. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
My name is Alan Piper, President of Citizens for Responsible Government. As I drove from St. Thomas and US 30 today, I kept thinking of how our forefathers cleared the fields, raised the families, built their homes, and sacrificed their lives many times due to hostile situations, poverty, along with disease. I could not help but think how our ancestors contributed in every way to the freedoms we enjoy today. Perhaps we have taken too much for granted and let the beauty and the glory of the day slip by us. An example would be the tragedy of 9/11 and how we American people have such short memories. Remember how people of all faiths come together, even non-believers, and prayed for our nation. Thousands of proclamations will be issued today celebrating the National Day of Prayer in its 61st year. Perhaps you could enlighten me if my Board of Commissioners honor and support this observance. Many times, and just recently, our organizations have asked you to allow a verbal or even a silent prayer prior to this meeting and have been denied each time, even after you, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Keller, and Mr. Ziobrowski have stated that it is your practice to pray silently. This is what we also are asking you to do. But do not deny us our right to stand before you and silently pray before we salute the flag. This must be placed on the agenda as most all the governing bodies have on theirs. Are you above the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Congress, and the governing bodies here and across this nation? I think not. Let me read something to you that might refresh your minds, and that it is not illegal for a person to pray aloud, as I do when my minister asks me to stand and recite the Lord's Prayer. The great person that I'm referring to, I can say with certainty that not one of us here today could come close to walking in his footsteps. And that great person is Benjamin Franklin. Let me read this to you today. Pray for our great nation. Several times over the last year, our nation has been called to prayer. This Thursday, May 3rd, millions will join together once again in tens of thousands of groups across the nation for the National Day of Prayer, humbly imploring God's blessing over this great nation. We will stand in the long tradition as we follow the recommendations of Benjamin Franklin, who appealed to the 1787 Constitutional Convention to pray for this nation. And when he said, and I quote, "I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, it is probable that an empire can rise without his aid. We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that built it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. It is truly time to ask that God would govern the affairs of men, that he would build the foundations of this nation, and that he would bless this great nation once again. Celebrate this 61st annual observance of this call by participating in the National Day of Prayer. In 1983, in March versus Chambers, 463 U.S. 783, the court specifically upheld the practice of the state legislature to open its sessions with prayer. While the Supreme Court has prohibited school-sponsored prayers at school events, these restrictions do not apply, and I repeat, do not apply to public meetings of legislative bodies. This is a United States Supreme Court ruling. Let me read further. Some contend that the Establishment Clause mandates the government cannot establish religion over non-religion, or a belief in God over a non-belief in God. Interestingly, an organization exists that advocates for this point of view. Example, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Most of us have heard of that organization. And there is some language in Supreme Court opinions that support this view. But the plain wording of the First Amendment and the historical context of the First Amendment does not support this view. Again, I repeat, does not support this view. Rather, the intent and the meaning of the First Amendment is that government cannot establish a religion. The First Amendment begins, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. To begin, there is a difference between religion and acknowledging a belief in God. The former is an organization, the latter is merely a belief. The First Amendment prohibition is that government cannot establish or become linked with a religion to the point that the religion and the government become excessively linked. This amendment was in response to the objectionable church-state links that existed in England and France, which discouraged, denied, and even punished people who dared to worship and live in ways that conflicted with the state religion. Most of us have read that in our history books. But the original intent of the Establishment Clause was not to suppress or prohibit the government from expressing a belief in God and from invoking God's blessing. Such expressions were matters of belief rather than connections with any one religious organization. Prayer at the beginning of a legislative session such as this is a statement of belief rather than the establishment of any formal connection with the mandates and requirements and conditions of any religion. Thus, even if the legislative prayers are regularly offered by one person of one particular faith, this imposes no requirement or condition of any one religion upon the government or of the people. Thus, the prayers offered by Reverend Palmer in the Nebraska State Legislature for 16 years, this was Marsh versus Chambers, was not found to violate the Establishment Clause per se. The court observed in March that Reverend Palmer's prayers did not appear to be offensive.
Mr. Piper, I'm enjoying your presentation, but you're close to 7 minutes. If you could try to tie it up shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. I will.
I will limit my time to Mr.
His time has been relinquished to me.
Well, we don't have a lot of time, so like I said, please try to wrap it up within the next minute or so.
I think that is honorable of my good friend. Thank you, Mr. Lightfoot, for granting me that time. I'm also asking why this body passes the entire agenda as of one motion and not discuss each agenda item before a vote is taken. This is not being open and transparent as you spend our tax dollars. Every meeting I attend, each item is discussed before a vote is taken. Now, the second question, do all of you read the agenda before the open public meeting And when do you see that agenda? And also, another part of that question is, who makes up the agenda for this meeting? Those questions I'm asking, I expect to have an answer, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm also requesting a copy of the minutes of each meeting. I request they be given to us after the previous meeting by your secretary. Is that okay with you, Mr. Chairman?
Well, can you clarify your question? You want minutes
Minutes of this meeting?
of this meeting?
Yes.
And when do you want them? Before they're approved by the board?
No.
Once they've been approved?
Once they've been approved, I would like to have a copy of those.
They're posted on our website.
I request a copy in writing, sir. A lot of people do not have computers, and I request a copy of those minutes by paper form. Thank you, gentlemen, for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. Sorry, Mr. Ziabrowski, my time, I think, is becoming Neil. Good to see you this morning. And I will place Mr. Hart, the lectern, back at the rear of the room so that people can sign in. And thank you, Mr. Hart, for allowing me to use this today. And perhaps the next time around, I will be more forthright and ask you permission for the use of it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Piper. Just to clarify, as we mentioned on Tuesday, and as Mr. Piper said, today is National Day of Prayer, and we want to make you aware that there's a local event at the King Street Nine Brethren Church from noon to 1 o'clock today. So please make a note of it. Is there any other public comment this morning?